everybody, and welcome along to a brand new video where we reach the end of the Second Doctor's era. It's the 10-part absolute epic story, The War Games. So yes, it's taken me the best part of 18 months, but I've finally reached the end of the black and white era of Doctor Who, the 1960s Who, with the final story, the 10-part The War Games, a story that I think is quite possibly the best of the black and white era. It really is right up there. So yes, this is a story I've seen a couple of times before, but probably not for 4 or 5 years. It really has been a while, so it still felt fairly fresh as a story to me when I was able to jump into it once again, having to watch it in several sections because it's just such a blooming long story. I think as much as I love Doctor Who, I feel I would struggle to sit down and watch all 10 episodes in 4 hours of it consecutively back to back. I think that would be a little bit much. But enjoying it in little sort of chunks of 3 or 4 episodes at a time, it's just such a brilliant, such a cleverly written story with so many different things thrown into it, and I think it really is the perfect send-off for Patrick Troughton's Doctor, and is just it feels exciting all the way through. And yes, right from the beginning when we see the Doctor, Jamie and Zoe arriving on this mysterious sort of battlefield-like place or a big quarry, which is ultimately apparently a rubbish dump in Brighton, quite interesting, not far from where I live, so that was quite interesting, and a little fun fact from the making of documentary. But yes, we turn up there and suddenly we're in the middle of World War One. The Doctor and co are suddenly getting sentenced to death, or the Doctor's getting sentenced to death because they're supposedly German spies. There's this mysterious General Smythe with his magic glasses that make people believe whatever he says, on a mysterious TV screen that's in 1917, which you don't quite expect at all. And I think what's great about this story, to at least start off with, is that for the first sort of 15-20 minutes until we see General Smythe acting rather shadily and using this TV screen, it just seems like a standard historical story. There's not really any obvious alien moment or threat or anything to come behind that, and I think that's so great. It really just establishes us in a World War One setting, in the trenches of World War One. It doesn't go that deep into trench life and what it was like, but there's still elements of that, I think, an aspect of that, and then obviously getting this ridiculous court-martial as well, that and the Doctor being sentenced to death and everything is just a great way to start off an epic story. And of course this is a story with really limitless potential in terms of you can explore so many different wars in these various war zones, and just keep padding out the episodes essentially. But I think it also works really, really well. Yes, there's no denying that a lot of the idea of this story really helps it in making it 10 episodes, because you can spend an episode in World War One zone, you can spend an episode in the American Civil War zone, in the Mexican zone, in the row with the Romans. You can do this and pad out episodes. There's no denying that. But I also think they were really fun and interesting and effective and keep building on the story. It doesn't feel like a whole episode is a waste of time and that we've got nowhere. It always feels the plot is moving on, I think, through this story. It always feels like there's going to be another revelation coming up, another surprise, another shock coming up, another twist. And that's what makes this story so brilliant and constantly engaging. Watching the making of documentary, I was also reminded of the sheer number of people involved in this story, the cast, the size of the cast. There's probably 3 or 4 new characters added in every single episode. There must be like probably 40 characters with a main speaking part in one or multiple of the episodes. It's crazy the scale that this story has got, exploring so many different wars and locations, and it just really, I think, makes it feel like such that real epic 10-part story, and obviously with the massive climax as well. I think this story also thrives on its villains. You have the more sort of lower level villains in that sense, in General Smythe and I can't remember the name of the bald dude who's sort of the German leader and the American leader. Those kind of guys are really kind of good on the surface. The initial, what seemingly are the initial villains, and it's kind of this great element of, we see who we think might be the villain, and then we see the war chief who we think is the villain, and then we see the warlord who is actually the villain. It just like sort of through the story we keep getting introduced to a higher authority that's sort of the running the shop in this sense. And so I think that's a really just effective way of keeping developing and surprising and making the story more and more interesting and adding new layers to it by bringing in higher enemies in that side of things. And so I think that works so effectively throughout this story. I think the war chief is a phenomenal character. He's very much playing the slightly sort of over the top panto style villain, very loud voice, dramatic, I'm going to succeed and take over the world and all this kind of thing. So it's not quite underwater menace over the top, but it does, so there's an element of that going on through this story. But it's also very, very interesting to watch because it's pretty much, well, a very rare occasion where we meet another one of the Doctor's people, who we only know as the Doctor's people at this point in the story, I believe, although I think, is it the head of security dude who says Time Lord at some point in this story? I can't quite remember, but I feel like before the end of the story, there is a mention of Time Lords. And of course the War Chief is a Time Lord, and so we get some really interesting moments in dialogue between the Doctor where the War Chief wants the Doctors for them to work together because they're from the same race and they can control the universe, and the classic, obviously, villainous plot. But it just feels like there's a few extra layers there with the War Chief being a Time Lord as well. Though one of the things I'm a little bit confused about is how the War Chief just died in episode 9, I think it was, where he just gets shot dead and is just dead. I thought, aren't Time Lords supposed to be regenerating? I know it was the 60s and they probably weren't quite thinking about that so much, but I kind of thought maybe it's that element of he was killed while trying to regenerate or something, I don't know. But it was a bit of a kind of an underwhelming end, I think, to a degree, that he was just shot dead and that was it. And of course the top villain introduced into this story, the War Lord, played by Philip Maddock, and he just... it's the perfect performance. It's so subtle and understated, but also so perfectly villainous and scary as well. So sort of his such sort of soft, dulcet tone to everything. Things appear to be going rather wrong at the moment, and it's just he's such a sort of calm, controlled, serious tone that is actually really, really scary when he's sort of getting angry but staying calm about it because everything's going a bit awry. That it's just such a brilliant villainous performance, I think, and he only sort of starts to let his rag go a little bit when he's actually being sentenced by the Time Lords right at the end of episode 10. That's when he sort of, the facade is finally lifted and he kind of loses his mind a bit before he gets obviously completely disintegrated and wiped from the existence of the universe. But yeah, I just think it's such a great villain. And to introduce, I think it's in episode 6 or 7 that he's brought in, and just, as I say, adds that extra layer to this story to keep it powering through and keep it interesting through a full 10 episodes. Because of course, yeah, it's not really normal to have a story that's 10 episodes long, but this was mainly down to sort of production requirements. I think various stories fell through. It was a real struggle at the end of season 6 to get any stories together. There just wasn't the scripts in there. Any scripts that were there were a bit rubbish. That's why we ended up with stories like the Crotons and the Space Pirates, which really are not good. Particularly the Space Pirates is really not a very good story at all, but it was just they had no other script, so they had to do it, and rather than trying to scrabble around for a 4-part that was probably going to be rubbish to fill in the sort of before a 6-part finale, they just thought, let's go for it, let's do a 10-part finale, we'll try and make it work. And actually I think it almost enhances the story, makes it even better, because it just means you can continue to introduce lots of different wars and develop characters in those different wars. We see the sort of crazy Mexican dude who's going around just blasting everybody. We see the American Civil War people. We see Russell and getting involved from I think that's is that the English Civil War bit, or the I can't remember if that he's from there or from the World War I zone. I kind of lose track. But just sort of developing those different areas, those different wars, a bit of a history lesson in their sense as well, in being able to focus and discuss lots of different wars. I know there's talk of a sort of a slight anti-war message, and I think there's an element of that in this episode. It doesn't feel preachy at all or anything like that, but there probably is, yes, there's some hints at how war is bad and that things can be resolved without fighting, but it's not in your face, I think, in this story, which is definitely to its credit. Maybe one of the few things that kind of slightly lets it down if you think about it too much is the actual aliens plot. I mean, they are just called the aliens. We never actually know what race the warlord is, or the security chief is, and those race of people, who they actually are, what planet they're from. I don't think we learn any of that. But they have a rather odd plan of pulling out human soldiers from different time zones to be able to fight to build up the perfect army, which kind of sounds all right. But having a load of soldiers from loads of different places, different countries in different times, trying to get them to work together, speaking different languages and everything, sort of practically it doesn't actually sound like it would really work in reality as much as let's get the soldiers to fight off to find the best soldiers. Kind of sounds a good idea. If you think about it too much, I think it starts to kind of fall apart a little bit, but I don't think it's a big thing, and it's still an interesting idea, which I didn't actually remember going into this story. I couldn't remember why they were doing any of this. So it's not brilliant, but I don't think it's particularly to the detriment of the story, because ultimately it's not explored that much. It's much more about the sort of war zones and the fight against, and the revolution fighting against the warlord and the war chief and the people running the shop in that sense. So I think that's more what this story is about than the ultimate aliens plan. And then, of course, the end of this story introduces the Time Lords for the very first time, bringing them into the show. The Doctor, I think, is a great idea that the Doctor finally sort of reaches such a big situation that he cannot deal with and sort out himself, that he's got to call on his own people as much as he knows it's a disaster for him because he ran away from Gallifrey and took a TARDIS and everything, and it's all quite bad. Not that we actually hear the name Gallifrey. I don't think in this story we hear the name Gallifrey. Maybe in the Three Doctors is the first time we hear it. Let me know in the comments below. I can't quite remember. My fandom knowledge is letting me down right now. But yes, we see the Time Lords for the very first time. This very sort of mysterious, I think essentially godlike people that we see. They're very much, straight away, they're going controlling time, being able to slow down time. They'll be able to just teleport and trap the Doctor and the companions and everything, and obviously move all these people back to their own time zones. I think it almost feels like they're at their most godlike, I think, that we ever see of any point of their sort of appearances in Doctor Who at this stage. They are very much the lords on high, complete control of the whole universe and everything in it, in that sense. And I think it really makes them a very big, a sort of ominous threat to the Doctor, but also a very sort of calm and understated threat, where when we see the trial scenes, none of them are getting over the top or angry or anything like that. They're just very calmly sort of saying, how do you plea against your defence of your crimes for stealing a TARDIS and interfering in other people's planets, and which they're not supposed to do. And I think it's just those sort of scenes in the trial scenes are absolutely captivating, where we see the Doctor trying to protest against what he does right, and we're all sort of cheering him on. We're like, yes, Doctor, we know that's why you do it. We want you to do that. And him showing all the various different aliens that he's seen, a little bit of fan service, fan moments there, seeing the Daleks and the Cybermen and the Crotons. I think, was it the Quarks? I can't quite remember which one it was. Maybe the Quarks and the Ice Warriors. And then Patrick Troughton's brilliant scene where he gets to sort of discuss how he's going to, what the faces that are shown up on screen and how he doesn't like all the different ones. It's just, for Patrick Troughton, I think it's just his kind of defining performance, maybe, this story. And he's just so brilliant in that last episode in particular. All the trial scenes, he absolutely owns the stage. He is the main man, really, throughout this story. It's great he has so much to do in his final story, because sometimes Doctors get a little bit, in some episodes, not necessarily for not their final stories, but in their stories can get left to do a little bit less. In the Space Pirates that I just watched, the Doctor does nothing to the main plot at all, essentially. So it kind of goes from one extreme to the other in this story, and I think that's absolutely great. And then we have to say goodbye to Jamie and Zoe as well. From behind the scenes, they all wanted to leave at the same time. Or Patrick wanted to leave, Fraser decided he should leave as well, wanted to leave with Patrick, and therefore Wendy felt she would leave as well, and they sort of all go together, and it leaves for what is a really kind of emotional and a really sad sort of exit. In the vein of Donna Noble in Series 4 of the new series of Doctor Who, where we see both Jamie and Zoe being wiped of pretty much all their experiences of being with the Doctor, and they get a little bit, but they only get to remember the one adventure they had before, when the sort of Doctor turned up in their world, and then he left, but on this occasion they didn't go with him, and they're trapped back into their normal lives, having not remembered any of it. So it means Jamie and Zoe never even met and don't know anything about each other at all. They don't know their existence, and that's sort of such a heartbreaking and sad one. I think sort of one of the most understated but heartbreaking exits for the Doctor's companions, to sort of the Doctor who's on his last legs really at this point. He knows all hope is lost really in terms of his trial against the Time Lords, as much as he's trying to sort of fight his fight and so show that he can carry on and everything. He sort of knows he's kind of losing and has to say goodbye to his companions as well, and you can see that sort of, it's not a sort of massive crying fest emotion in that sense, but it's just such an understated, sad, sort of a sad smile that they all give to each other as they leave for the final time, and just, yeah, a really, really sad moment to end Jamie and Zoe's tenure in the TARDIS. And then finally, of course, to set off the new era of Doctor Who for the 1970s, we see the Doctor being exiled to Earth, trapped on Earth, sent off to be given a new face and a new body. We don't see what it is as he's spinning off into oblivion at the end of the episode, but being sent, trapped on Earth to be sort of helping with Unit again, of course, once we get to the 1970s. And just a clever idea, I think, obviously sort of required by budget, mainly making it easier and cheaper to do Doctor Who when they can just use current locations, and reusing locations and using Unit and the same actors and things like that again. That was all helpful from that side, but also I think makes what I'm really looking forward to watching most of again, because I've seen pretty much all of it before, but one of my favourite eras of the show. So lots of exciting things to come for me, and if you guys are watching it as well. But yes, I really do think that the War Games is an absolute masterpiece. As much as in some of the earlier episodes, there's a little bit of a going around in circles, the old escape capture idea comes into play a little bit, but it always feels like we're 5 minutes away or a moment away from another big revelation or a plot twist or something major happening. And so it means it never really slows down for me. It always engages you, always keeps you interested, and you always want to find out more about what's going on, with a satisfying conclusion, great villains throughout this story as well, and introducing a new bit of lore into Doctor Who with the whole the Time Lord race for the very first time. I really think it is a masterpiece. But what about you guys? What do you think of this story? Do you think it's as good as the hype sort of says that it is, or is it not quite living up to it for you? Do you think it's one of the best stories or not quite there? I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts down in the comments below. But that's just about it from this video, guys, and that's it for the second Doctor era. I will be coming back to do a sort of retrospective look over the whole of Patrick Troughton's tenure as the Doctor, like I did with William Hartnell's Doctor back in, I think that must have been December, January time. I did that sort of retrospective review. So that'll be something to look out for in the coming weeks. I'll also be taking a look at the Dalek movies, with featuring Peter Cushing as the Doctor, and seeing if, I haven't watched them before a long time ago, as to if they are actually any good or not. So there'll hopefully be a couple of reviews up for those stories, and then we'll get cracking on the 1970s with Spearhead from Space. But that's just about it from this video, guys. With a like button, subscribe if you're new here, and I'll see you again very soon for another one. Goodbye.